priority right now. So that, anyway, I like that idea, and I think we probably should do more of it. Sometimes we're also in a contest to see who can do more things, and I feel like social media just amplifies that. You're like, this person, did all these things, and they're only 4 years old. I can't get a doctorate at 4. That's long, long past. So, what? It's not a competition. And so kind of as we look at this and say, for me, what are we going to do? Now, I think in some ways we need to approach kind of the things we do a little bit more like maybe we used to approach work and some things. Have you milked a cow, just out of curiosity? Okay, all right, I've seen a few. All right. Now, for those of you that have, if you're living on a farm or working with a cow, can you just batch milking a cow? Like maybe you're going on vacation, you're like, I'm going to milk it all today so I don't have to do it for the rest of the week. No, right? That's just not how it works. And I think sometimes we try to optimize, just all the things we're doing so we can just get more in. I feel like I get hit with these ads on different places, and it's like, I'm going to help you optimize your optimization rituals. What are you talking about? There are some things in life that just you cannot optimize. Like you can't make the cow do this faster. There are certain things that we have that they just are going to take time, and we have to be okay with that. We are never going to be done with laundry ever, right? As much as we try to do that, like you're never going to get to the point where you say, I'm done. I mean, you won't. So, and it just takes time, and there's things that you have to do, and it's going to keep coming up. I mean, email in some ways is the same way. You're never going to just not get email or get to the end and be like, okay, I have completed email for the rest of my life. At the same time, you don't want to get to the end of your life and say, I was really good at processing email. That's probably not going to be your top claim to fame in looking at this. So the point here is that our to-do list is always going to have things on it. It can be, our time is always going to be filled with some things. Some things are just going to take time, and we're going to have to be okay with that. It was interesting. My family and I took a little trip at the end of January, and on that trip, my phone died. And I mean, just died. And then we were out of the country, so that made it fun because I'd made all the arrangements and all this stuff was on my apps and everything. But it was dead. We made it home. We were okay. But it took about 2 weeks for me to get my phone again. And so, but think about if you didn't have access to your phone for the next 2 weeks, like calls, texts, none of it. Okay. Other than the frustration of having to go back to my childhood and think, okay, meet meet outside of the copper rivet 3. But what was interesting to me was that I missed 2 weeks worth of people's updates and posts and different things, and it was fine. In fact, I feel like I didn't miss anything really. It's all the same. But also, I found that there were certain things that I'd focus on. Like all of a sudden, I started reading more, and I was enjoying it. Even though the first few days I was reading, and then I kept reaching for my phone, like, what am I gonna do with that? Or you find that you're watching a show, you're reaching for your phone to be like, well, I just gotta look what else this person was in, or you just gotta look something. And it's been interesting to think about how that helped me kind of realize how much I distract myself with so many different things, and that if I kind of focus on, what are things that just need to be done, okay, we'll get those done. But there are also things that can wait till tomorrow, and that will be fine. And that if we don't get to it, it'll be okay, like email, I mean, maybe you don't want to get to 285,000 unread email messages. At that point, just delete them all. But that's there's always going to be things that are happening. And what my point is that we have to be fine and learn to accept that there's always going to be a cow to be milked. There's always going to be the laundry, those different things, and those that's just part of life. There's no end to some of those things. We have to recognize that, accept it, and kind of say, okay, but where do I focus my time, elsewhere? When I have discretionary things that I need to do, what's most important? How can I spend time there? Okay, so at your tables, just really quick, at what time do you first check email? So just to find out. So find out from your neighbors.
Check it 3 times. Start doing something I know I need to do before I get something done.
If I'm at home, it's like a text message. Yeah, that makes sense. What I need to do is.
Okay.
You know? That's fine.
So did any of you
Totally.
I'll read that later. How many people check it maybe like first thing, right off the gate, right out of the gate?
Grumpy.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what did you hear? Maybe some of you were first thing. Anybody else? Like when do you first check? 5 a.m. What's funny about doing that is that as soon as you start checking, that starts setting the agenda for your day. So if you're doing that right off the bat, then that's gonna take you in a certain direction. So if you want to be more intentional, just don't check it for a while, which is scary. I know. But just give yourself some time to kind of refocus, say, even just to look and say, what do I need to do today, or what's the most important thing before you get there? Decide what you're going to work on before you get there. We're never going to get down to zero in the pursuit of like, well, if I can just get them all and get them down to zero, then we'll be okay. There's always going to be more, right? Just like there's always more. You spend more time with the cow, I guess. Think about it. We have to kind of accept our limitations. We can't possibly process all of these. We can't possibly do things, and sometimes we can't speed it up. Can't tell us. Send me all of your spam email right now so that I can just get rid of it. Would that be great? So, anyway, so as we're looking at this, emails change over time, and what a great method of communication for so many things. I think back when I first got my first email account in January of 1994, okay, here on campus, and we had like 2 email. I think I had 3 email addresses. It was like my friend that was also in the class, the professor, and Bill Clinton's, because they gave it to us. Because at that point, Bill Clinton had an email. You could actually send him an email. Things have changed. Okay. You had to go to the Talmadge building. It was a lot of fun. But as we now, I mean, think about it. Anybody in the world can contact anybody else in the world pretty much with email, with or without our permission. Like, just send something, and then you've got to deal with it. And whether it goes into the delete box, you've got to do something, and it's just fascinating, how it can be such a great tool of communication, but it can also be very overwhelming. And so, yeah, if we can stop kind of obsessing about or trying to be like, like this person's really not obsessed with getting their email down to 0, but we can be okay with just saying a lot of these messages probably aren't going to matter. Now, there are some that are important. You should check those. I read this really awesome story about a woman that came back from maternity leave. I was just talking to her friend and just going along and doing this, and her friend watched her as she went in and just did like Control-A, selected all the messages and just deleted them. And her friend was like, so horrified. She said, it's fine. If they need me, they'll get a hold of me. And it was fine. Like a couple weeks went by and she didn't miss anything. Now, I'm not saying that you should delete all of them. I just want to make that clear. But they're probably less important than we think they are. And we do have limitations around that. So, let's not drive ourselves crazy with trying to just, if I can just optimize this, or if I can make this faster, or try to get through it better. There are things that we can do to help ourselves, like, batching emails, instead of answering them nonstop throughout the day is probably more ideal. So picking a couple of times, or maybe even, once an hour or something, checking it, doing that. The idea is that if you're focusing on what you're trying to do, email is going to be a distraction, same as text messages or other things. And so if you can kind of batch those and just take care of what you need to take care of, do a little triage, that's okay. And then set that aside and move it. So turn off the notifications and the dings and the beeps and all that. Check it when you want to check it. That can be helpful to help you focus. Okay, we'll stop talking about email because that's going to make us all nervous. I love this idea, and this comes from the 7 habits. Kind of the idea of, how many of you read the 7 habits of highly effective people, or are familiar with that? So one of the things that Dr. Covey talks about is that there are certain things out there that we have no control of, but we worry about. we called that kind of that circle of concern. We can be concerned with all kinds of things, whether it's the price of gas or eggs, for that matter, in the world. But we can't. I mean, there's not a lot we can do about that. And so there's a limited amount we can do. But what we should do is focus instead on the area of things we can influence. Like I can't control whether nations or anything decide to how much oil they're going to pump or do different things, and all of the in between with that. But when it's a little bit warmer weather, I can ride my bike to work. I mean, that's something I can do personally that I can help in just in my own sphere. And so this is something that it's just our HR department is always talking about this, is that there are certain things, there are policies that are in place that we didn't know, that maybe we don't agree with, or maybe we do agree with, but are just difficult. We can't do a lot of things there's so many things that are out of our control. Where we want to focus our efforts is what can we control? I may not be able to, change everybody's mind about something in the world, but what can I do with the person next to me? Or how can I take actions that can show an example? Or, what can I do this? So think about things in your life. It can be really frustrating and kind of lead to burnout to just spend our time in that circle of concern. If we can kind of focus a little bit more and spend a little bit more time on, okay, but what can I do? What can I move? What's the small thing that I can do to move forward? And it's those small things that often can add up to be big changes, and our circle of influence can actually grow as we're doing and making a difference there. So I like this idea in reference to burnout, because it's easy to get frustrated and burned out when we're living in that circle of concern. So maybe I'm concerned about that. What can I do? What's even a small thing, but what can I do to move towards where I want to be? And if we can focus there, that can be helpful. All right. The other thing too is that often we've talked about this a little bit. We try to just speed things up or say, well, if I could just get better and faster and do this, but there's a limit, right? Just like the cows and everything, there's a limit to how fast we can do things. Also, it's not really effective to be efficient with people. We can try to optimize a machine, but if we try to be efficient with people, I don't know if you've tried that and how effective that is. People don't love it, to feel like they're being efficient. Okay, so one of the things that I like this idea is to shift our thinking from being more productive. Like you'll hear all this, oh, I want to be more productive, but to try to saying, oh, okay, where can I have an impact? This goes back to thinking about where should I be putting my time? I've got a finite amount of time. We really do. On average, we live about 4,000 weeks. That's interesting. And if you break that down, and where you are, you're like, okay, I have a limited amount of time in life in general, but also just in my day or my week. And once we kind of realize that, you say, okay, well, maybe the laundry can be done tomorrow, or maybe I don't need to get to some of these emails. That's fine. Where do I need to do this, and where can I have an impact? And so, we have a lot of tools to be productive, more than any time in history, right? We've got all these cool gadgets and things that can help us. But I don't think the goal should be more productive or more output, because that's going to lead to burnout. We have to be looking at activities that are going to give us the biggest value, or to have an impact on what we're trying to accomplish, or what we're trying to do or be. And so, that's where we want to put our focus is on the impact. Okay, so that leads us to our third thing. One of the things that we have to learn to do if we're going to make a bigger impact, if we're going to kind of take the inventory of things that we've agreed to do, is sometimes we've got to say, all right, where do I need to cut back, or where do I need to say no? So coming back to this idea, and this is a big one. Again, I feel like we could probably spend all day talking about this too, but this isn't about just being rude or secluding yourself, or not having email anymore. That would be hard. But like I said, we have to accept two pretty big facts. There are only 24 hours a day. And even if there were 26, we'd have the same problems. And we can only do one thing at a time. And so we've got to kind of figure out what's the cue here. What are the things that are really important? And so work should also not be consuming 12 of those 24 hours. It just shouldn't. We're not designed for it. We shouldn't be doing that. We have a lot of better things to do. Now, the other thing that to kind of recognize with this is that I think in our BYU culture in general are very people pleasing. Would you agree with me on that? It's hard to say no. Like, in fact, and I think some of that stems from sort of an idea of, I don't know, this is just my theory, but this kind of legacy of pioneers and different things. It's like, well, this person, walked through all these miles in the snow with bare feet, you can go set up chairs. All right, I guess I do. But we're in a different set of circumstances, and we've got to be better at being able to prioritize and be able to kind of negotiate these things and realize that sometimes we do need to kind of say no, which doesn't, again, we don't have to be rude about it, but we've got to be able to say yes, really, to the things that are higher priority for us. So when we're looking at our commitments, you've got that list of commitments, all those things, the to-do list. And then so when you're going through and saying, okay, I've got a half hour, I've got an hour before the next class, what do I want to do? And you're looking at your, at school or something list. And you're looking through this and you've got something to do. And you've got pretty much three options. We can either do it, delegate it. Sometimes that's not always, who am I going to delegate this? Or renegotiate it. And sometimes renegotiation means just getting rid of it. So those are kind of some things. So, we should probably decline requests a little bit more. But I'm just gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna guess that a lot of you are still a little bit overcommitted in life. Of course I can take on that new project, or yeah, I'd love to do that. I mean, there's so many things that we'd love to do. But we've got to kind of focus and narrow that down a little bit to help ourselves. Okay, so whoops, I went the wrong way. I love this quote from Peter Drucker. There's nothing so useless as doing that efficiently that which should not be done at all. We've got to decide what shouldn't be done. Okay, so we talked about if you know what you're committed to, if you have that idea, if you know what's really on your plate, you are much less likely to take on more stuff. Problem is when it's all in our head and we're just guessing, we're like, well, yeah, I could squeeze that in. And we get ourselves in trouble. So the more that you know, the awareness is really helpful. Okay, here's something that you can do. Like if you did the sticky notes thing, I've done this before on my whiteboard in my office, is I will just start listing like, okay, here's projects, we'll get them on there. Okay. So, I wrote them all out, and then this was kind of that next step. Is I say, okay, this is right now versus future, but high priority, less, kind of optional. And so if I've got that, and what I find is that often all the sticky notes will end up right here, right? So I have to start making choices. Okay, well, out of these things, I can't do 16 things. I can only do one thing at a time. I might be able to juggle a couple of projects, but I've got to I'm going to push this out. I'm going to do this. The other great thing about this is, in like a work situation, you can, your boss comes and says, hey, I've got this project I'd like you to take on. You're like, that's fantastic. Which of these three would you like me to bump to do that? You can't have that conversation unless you know what we've committed to. But if I have this and I'm saying, well, I'm working on this, this, and this, where does that fit in the priority? And they say that's a top priority. Like, okay, what about these other things? And then they're going to go give it to your neighbor. And they haven't gone through this, so they don't know. So they're just going to take it. So now the whole thing to say this is that we're not trying to just get out of work. What we're trying to do is, we want to be a contributor that craves focus. Where should I focus my time? Not just somebody who's just trying to do this. Okay, there's a big difference. And there's some ways that we can do this so we can show our good intent when we're trying to have these conversations. I know this is really teeny, but I'll read this. But I wanted to talk with you about what I'm working on right now. I want to make sure I'm focusing on the highest leverage work. I'd like to get your help in prioritizing what's most important. So that'd be a good conversation you can have with the boss, or even with your team, if you're doing a team project. I wanted to share some concerns I have about my project load. I want to be a solid contributor, but I also don't want to miss anything. And I'm afraid I've got too many balls in the air. So we talk about this. I don't want to disappoint you or let you down. Keeping commitments is a big deal to me. That's why I want to make sure I can keep the commitments I've already made. These are ways that we can kind of start the conversation and talk through what's going on. So
crucial conversation.
yeah, you can. Yeah, that's a whole different thing. We can come back. Okay. I want to make sure I'm investing my time and energy on things that make the biggest impact to our team. So going back to, okay, so those are the three ideas. Just as we're thinking about burnout, like we can't magically make things go away. Tasks still need to be met. Our email is going to keep coming, but if we can know the commitments that we've made and be careful about the commitments that we make, make sure that they're contributing to where you want to go. Focus on, a thing at a time. What's the most important thing that I can do right now? And recognize our limits with that. We can't focus on everything. Focus is by definition limiting. And then the third thing is just to identify when and how to say no. And hopefully if we can kind of get a little bit better at that, then that can help us, manage this burnout and keep moving forward. Yeah, but don't forget, protect the asset. Take care of yourselves. That's going to be probably in the end very, very important. So that was a lot I threw at you. I don't know if you have any questions. We're probably pretty much out of time here, but
Well, let me ask you this by a raise of hands. How many of you know right now what you need to do, what you need to tweak in your own life and in your own graduate work? Okay. So this is a very practical session for which we're most grateful, Greg.
Yeah.
Thank you for not saying no to us. Small token of our thanks, if you want to be first in line for our soup. And Eliza, will you be kind enough to offer a blessing on the food and on our